Hey everyone, welcome back to TLB Station. In today's JavaScript tutorial, we are going to learn how to access and interact with HTML elements using JavaScript. We access them to make website interactive, such as handling user inputs, showing or hiding content, or even changing the content or style of an element. You need to be able to select or access those elements from the DOM, which stands for Document Object Model. JavaScript lets us do that easily. There are 6 ways to access HTML elements in JavaScript: the getElementById method, the getElementsByClassName method, the getElementsByTagName method, the querySelector method, the querySelectorAll method, and accessing form elements by name. We'll go over each one with an example. First, I created a form and a paragraph for testing. The form has a name attribute and contains 2 text fields, a checkbox, and a button. Each input element is given a name, class, and ID, and I've set initial values for the text fields. Now, to access them in JavaScript. First, the getElementById method. We declare a variable called input1 to hold a reference to the input field with the ID ID1. To do this, we use the document getElementById method and pass the ID as a string in quotes. Let's break it down. Document. This keyword is a global object that refers to the document object model, DOM. It represents the entire HTML document currently loaded in the browser. getElementById. This method is used to access an element in the DOM by its unique ID attribute. You pass the ID as a string, in this case, ID1, and it returns the element itself. We will use console.log method to outputs value of the input field to the console window and check if we accessed it successfully. We use the value property alongside the variable name to access or modify the content inside. As you see, the value has been printed in the console. Note that the value property is used to get the value for form elements like input, text area, select, and button. There are other properties for the other elements, as we will see now. To access or change the checkbox state, first we make a variable called checkbox and make a reference for it using getElementById method with its ID. Then we use the checked property to check its current state, which returns either true or false depending on whether the checkbox is checked or not. Since the checkbox is not checked by default, false will be printed. And if we want to access or change the value of the paragraph, we make a new variable for it with the same way as the others using its ID, and we can access its value with 3 properties. 1. Text content property. 2. Inner HTML property. 3. Inner text property. And we can change the value of the first input using the value property just like this. You can also apply the same concept to other elements by using the appropriate properties for each element. You can also directly access and modify any element without the need to define a variable. Like here, we will change the paragraph text using one of the 3 methods we mentioned. Next, the getElementByClassName method. We start by defining a variable called input1 to store a reference of the first input field using the getElementByClassName method with its class name. Now, if you tried to use the value property to change its content, it will not work. Why? Because the getElementsByClassName method selects all elements that share the class you entered and returns them as an HTML collection. You can access HTML collections using an index, so we will use for loop to iterate through all the elements. It starts from index 0 to the length of the collection. Inside the loop, we access each individual element in the collection using input 1 index of I, and we change the value for each element using the value property. Since the collection has only 1 element, the first input field, it will change its value only. Since the first 2 inputs share a class, we can use it to change their value at the same time, like this. There are also 2 other ways by converting the HTML collection to an array. The first is by using the array_from method. It creates a new array from an array-like or iterable object, such as an HTML collection. This allows us to use array methods like forEach to iterate over it and change each element's value, like this. The second way is by using the spread operator, the 3 dots, to convert the collection into an array, and you will achieve the same result. Next, the getElementByTagName method. We use the getElementsByTagName method by passing the tag name as a string. In this case, we use the input tag, and it will return an HTML collection containing all the input elements in the document. So, we'll use one of the three ways we mentioned earlier to iterate over the collection. For example, we can use the spread operator to convert it into an array, and then use the for-each method to loop through the elements and change the value of each input, like this. Next, the querySelector method. The querySelector method retrieves the first element that matches the selector you use. You can use it with ID, class, or a tag name. To use it with an ID, you write the hash symbol followed by the ID name, like this. To select elements by class, you use the dot symbol followed by the class name. You can also select elements by tag name by simply writing the tag name without any symbols. Next, the querySelectorAll method. Unlike the querySelector method, which selects only the first element that matches the selector, the querySelectorAll method selects all elements that match the selector and returns a node list. The node list returned can be treated like an array, which means we can directly use the for-each method to iterate over all the selected elements. Next is accessing form elements by name. There are three different ways to access forms in JavaScript. The first method is document.forms. This method returns an HTML collection containing all the forms in the document. To verify this, we can print the forms variable to the console. As shown, it returns an HTML collection with a length of 1, indicating that we have only one form in the document. We can access the form by converting the HTML collection to an array using array from method, and then we can use the for-each method to iterate over it. By printing the output to the console, we can see that it returned an HTML collection with all the form elements inside. So, we can use another for each method to iterate over the elements inside the form and print each element to the console. We can also modify form elements by checking their type using an if statement with the type property. For example, if the element type is text, we can use the value property to change its value. If the element type is checkbox, we can use the checked property to change its state. You can also use additional if statements to handle other types of elements. The second way to access forms in JavaScript is by using the document.forms method, followed by the form name in square brackets. And we will need only one for-each method to iterate over the elements inside the form. The last way to access form elements in JavaScript is by using the document.forms method, followed by the form name in square brackets, and then specifying the name of the input field or any form element. Since there is only one input field with the name input1, we can directly use the value property to change its value. Now, if we give the two input fields the same name, an HTML collection will be returned. So we need to convert it into an array and use the for-each method to iterate over each input field and modify them accordingly. And that's how you can access and manipulate form elements in JavaScript using different methods. If you found this tutorial helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more tutorials. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.